We're all sovereign of our own worlds. When we create our world, it's part of the whole world. For me, it's very important that we all create the best, most beautiful reality that we can, that we are as joyful and happy as we can be, that we are creating as much beauty as we can be in whichever way, that whatever it is that we do. When you start listening to intuition and you follow those hunches, nobody says it's going to be easy. You have to give something up. This is what people don't want to do, myself included. You have to let go of something. And talking more on a global level, to kind of enter a new reality, we've got to give up the old. And people don't want to give it up, obviously, you know, understandably. Nobody wants to give up things. But one way or another, we have to. That's what change is about.
Welcome back, dear friends. We have been online with this series for 36 episodes since June, and what a journey we've been on. We're here with our very last episode of the series. Some highlights for me over these episodes have included Jyoti, Ibu Robin Lim, Nina Simons, Phoebe Tickell, Matt McCartney, and Phap Lin. It's hard to pick out specific episodes or moments, though as each conversation has moved me in some way and opened and activated something profound in me. I hope that each episode has been a gift for you too in this way. Thank you to our newest patrons, Lucy White and Paolo Becerra. We love our patron community and appreciate you keeping on supporting us over the break so we can be sharing episodes and reaching new people across the globe. We will also still have our monthly video calls over these months too. Feel free to join us as a patron by going to our website and visiting the community and support page. We'll be offline now for 3 months and back in late May, early June with Series 4. During this time, I'll be writing my book on intuition, which will be out at the end of the year. And if any of you have any stories about your own intuition opening up or questions about intuition that you'd like to have answered, please do email me in the coming weeks on connect@thefutureisbeautiful.co. I might not be able to include your stories, but as always, I love to be in dialogue with you, and it's really great to be connected and to hear the ways that your intuition speaks to you. As you know, we have a wonderful team that we love dearly, including Mary Chan, our sound editor, and Lucy White, our wordsmith. Lucy has been with us from the beginning and is a dear friend who I met many years ago and have got to spend time with over the years in different ways. She's leaving us now to focus on launching some new projects. We are so unbelievably grateful for Lucy and the time and dedication she's brought to the show. Personally, Lucy has been a great support to me and there for the hairy behind-the-scenes moments that we've had a few times, especially at the start of this adventure. What I admire about Lucy is her deep curiosity, openness, and that nothing that anyone has said on this show in 4 years has fazed her. She has such a wide reach of understanding and interest. She also has a heart of gold and a beautiful sensitivity, which she has brought to this show. We wish Lucy great luck in her future projects, and you can connect with her at Lucy Rose UK on Instagram and through her copywriting company, Glowing Phrases. Here are some words from Lucy herself.
Just wanted to thank you all for joining us on this journey. It's been a privilege to help give so many fantastic voices a platform to be heard by new audiences. One thing I love about this podcast is that it brings diverse and powerful stories to the fore and gives us a chance to hear about people who are busily weaving a beautiful future for themselves and for people around them in these times of great change and many choices to be made. It's been a delight to work with and to learn from Mary and Amisha, a really top-notch team to be working with, and I'll miss them both. I'll be continuing to support the podcast as a patron. In the meantime, I'll be moving on to support new projects getting launched, which is kind of where I seem to fit. I love getting new things off the ground and supporting visions to be brought into form. So I wish you all the very best and It's been a pleasure to be on this journey with you, and I wish you happy trails and smooth seas going forward. Lots of love.
This, of course, means that before May, we'll be looking for somebody to join our team. Your role will be to receive the unedited interviews, listen through and transcribe and make edit notes on where there are coughs, interruptions, or things that need to be edited out. Then you'll write the titles and words that accompany these podcasts. We also need somebody to do our social media and newsletters, which could be the same person or could be two different people. If this feels like you, write to us at connect@thefutureisbeautiful.co. As it's my birthday tomorrow, it's a time that I get to celebrate being here. And so I have a lovely offer for those of you that want to join Presence Collective, which is our sister project where we explore a monthly theme and enjoy tree whispers, contemplation questions, meditations, and other practices which actually bring us to embodying the kinds of things we talk about on this podcast. If you want to join this beautiful community and have this reminder and guide to keep you on your path in your everyday life, you can enjoy this offer where your first month is half price so you can try it out. This is available for a week until March the 5th, so you can find the link on our courses page of our website. I also want to share that we're doing a special collaboration starting in June with St. Ethelburgers, which is called Listening to Each Other, Listening to Earth. There will be an interview with a live podcast on Wednesday the 17th of June for those in London, and also a workshop on Sunday the 5th of July that I'll be facilitating, as well as 7 podcasts which we'll release each month between June and December. So really looking forward to sharing that with you, and you can find out more about that at the St. Ethelburgers website, and we'll of course add the details as we get them to ours as well. For this week, my guest is Atulya Bingham, who is one of our wonderful patrons. Atulya is an author, mud builder, and earth whispering off-gridder who lived in Turkey for 20 years alone in her mud hut with the snakes and scorpions and her dog until 2016, when a sequence of dramatic events caused her to leave Turkey. Atulya builds off-grid worlds out of clay and lime while listening to the very dirt she stands on for guidance. And when she's not covered in mud, she's sitting with the trees and rocks and penning their magical utterances. She speaks 5 languages, 6 if you include Guyane, and loves using words to unlock doors of potential in the human psyche. Today, Atulya runs the extensive Mud Home website, a hive of open source information and inspiration for people dreaming of muddy off-grid worlds. She also pens the Earth Whispering blog, which charts her inner and outer journey as she constructs a new off-grid world alone in Spain. Her numerous books reflect her love of the planet, freedom, and empowerment. In this conversation, we explore the question, what does it take to create a life you love close to nature? I hope that this inspires you and opens up your connection with the wild. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. I am delighted today to be joined by Atulya Bingham. Welcome to the show, Atulya.
Hello, Amisha.
And it's really lovely to be interviewing you today because you're one of the very first patrons that we had for this show. One of
Am I?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like you were one of the first people that I didn't know that became a patron. Was, very early supporter of the show, and it really is one of the greatest joys of having created this project is the amazing people that it has brought into my life and into kind of our awareness and this community. And so I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the Patreon calls as well.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's really been very nice. You're right. It's a very, a nice group of people.
I think my first sort of real understanding of your lifestyle was on a Patreon call where you said, I've got to go now because I'm about to run out of power. And and then I was like, okay. Because I had of course understood that you were living off grid and living a different kind of lifestyle. But it's one of those things where so many of us are in a position where we talk about these things and we're kind of interested in these things, but not many people are actually fully living it in a completely committed way as you are.
Yeah. I think probably after that call, I didn't manage to get on another Patreon call for about 8 months. Yeah, because for that very reason. There's a lot of romanticism. You're absolutely right about the off-grid lifestyle, but there's also a lot of hidden beauties, I think, as well. And there's lots of kind of off-grid, of course. There's people doing various types of off-grid thing. I mean, not everybody's doing it in the same way I am, and your bank balance obviously makes a bit of a difference to your comfort level. But yes, certainly. Power, actually, I have to admit, if I wasn't working online and if I didn't have online commitments, then I don't think power would be a big problem to me, to be honest. I actually quite like being without it. I think it's quite interesting how people obsess about the power thing. They think that without power, they're going to die. No one dies without power unless they've got a medical machine that they need power for. I mean, normally you're not going to die without power. Water, on the other hand, shelter, these things, clothes, they're a lot more fundamental. And I think that's one of the things you sort of learn when you peel back the sort of things that we're told are necessary. You peel back and realize that it's not the things that you thought they were.
Mm-hmm. So it's been around a decade, has it now?
Though I've moved locations. So it started in Turkey, and it was never my dream. You're right. A lot of people have this as a dream. It's a kind of it's a goal. It never was for me. And I'm a little bit, I'm not too sure about those big dreams. It can end up being a head game. And that was never the case for me. I ran out of money. I bankrupted myself. I was burned out from a teaching career and I couldn't stand to do any more of it. And so I had a piece of land, and it was very small. Most people would say that wouldn't be big enough. It was a tiny piece of land in Turkey in the hills. And so I just decided, I was desperate, and I just decided, okay, I'm going to go up there and camp until I sort my head out. And everybody said at the time, oh, you can't go up there on your own. You'll be murdered, raped. There's no water. How will you survive? There was no power. There was nothing at all up there. And so I took my tent and I camped there. And it was very, very fast for me. Within a couple of weeks, I'd say, of being camped up there, I realized I didn't want to go back down again. I somehow started connecting with the land and with nature in a completely different way, and started to really wonder what the rest of the world was doing. Mm-hmm. Because the simple things like getting up with the sun, because I had no light. I had nothing. I had a little $40 Carrefour tent. That's all I had. So I was getting up with the sunlight and going to bed with the sunlight. And automatically you get into this very healthy rhythm, which again is one of those things I think people don't realize, but how that affects you. And how non-natural light affects us, and how not touching the dirt affects us, how not breathing clean air affects us. It's how all of those things really impact the way our well-being, our happiness. That's the key. I sort of feel in a way that sadly, I sort of feel the environmental movement in a way has barked up the wrong tree, because it isn't about surviving for me. No one's going to survive. We're all going to die at some point. Everything dies at some point. It's about your quality of life and your happiness. Sometimes I feel it's a bit like trying to explain color to a blind person who's never seen color. There are qualities of life which people are completely missing. And people who are viewed as lucky in the world, but they're not lucky really for me. I mean, they've missed something. Something very beautiful, which perhaps some like hunter-gatherer communities are still in touch with and still fighting to hold on to, even incredibly in the circumstances. But so for me, that experience was very, very powerful in a very short amount of time. And then I didn't want to leave that piece of land. So I had no building experience at all at the time. It was quite hilarious. I couldn't even put a shelf up. If you'd have told me that I was going to start building houses 15 years ago, I would never have believed you. That wasn't my thing at all. I was a teacher and a yoga teacher and an English teacher. I've taught everything under the sun, but nothing to do with building. But slowly I was up on this land. And of course you need things like composting toilet or place to wash your dishes. And this is what becomes very obvious quite quickly, how certain things are very fundamental. A small kitchen area is pretty fundamental. It's very, very difficult to prepare food without a place to do it. A bathroom area is pretty fundamental. Again, power isn't even coming into it, yet. You're looking for your real basics. How are you just going to get through each day? So I started I was drawing on all my experience from Girl Guides back trying to lash rope bits of wood together, and it was pretty funny now I think about it. The first time I banged a nail in, I felt it was a massive engineering achievement for me. But slowly I began to kind of create this little hobbit world up there, and I realized, which I would never have known if I hadn't run out of money and camped up the hill, I realized I love building. I love it. I adore it. It's creative. You're using so many skills at the same time. I like the physical side of it, and I like the creative side of it, and I like the problem solving side of it. I like all of it. Yeah, I didn't know. I would never have known. I often think how many things we don't know that we love because we're never pushed into a situation where we have to do it. So I started building this little world up, and I thought I was going to live in a tent forever. I'd got to the point, I think after about 3 or 4 months, where I was sure that's it. I don't want a house. I don't want roofs. I want to be totally connected to nature. I was having these wonderful experiences with animals that sort of, for example, you leave your cooking out, your dirty dishes out, and then I'd wake up in the morning and they'd all be clean because the lizards and the rats and whatever else had come and cleaned everything. And so then it's very easy to wash them after that because they've like picked everything away. It was incredible.
And you've been sharing, so
yeah, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. They're going to love all these animals that were a part of my life, whereas before I would have been terrified.
If there's a rat in your kitchen licking your washing up, most people are not into that.
Yeah, exactly. And so they are the cleaners of the planet, and they're amazing. Eventually, when I sort of saw them all around on the floor of my kitchen area, I'd be so happy because they would be cleaning the whole thing and it would be absolutely spotless by the morning. You'd come in, it's like they've done you don't need to vacuum anymore. That's it.
It's quite something watching them all in their lines and how they pass things along, and
they are incredible. And I often think from the ant perspective, because we see everything from the human perspective, but from the ant perspective, in their kingdoms and their worlds, who are we? What are we for them? I don't know. I'm always wondering this. What do all animals really think about us? I don't know. It's quite interesting. I get the impression they think better of us than we do of ourselves a lot of the time, though. I get the impression they're quite willing to connect. Once they've sussed you out and they've sensed that you're not going to be dangerous to them, they want to get into that relationship, into that harmony, and it's really beautiful when that happens. It feels like a family. It's wonderful.
Can I ask, before you found yourself camping on this mountain, were you outdoorsy and earthy? Were you good with being on your own generally, or kind of, on your own in the wilderness?
I would say I'm one of these introvert extrovert people, so I like being alone, and I think that's very important. A lot of people try this and don't like it. It's true, and it seems to be about that alone thing. It's not the wild. I don't think. I think everybody, we come from it. We come from nature, so I think it pretty much everybody gets something. Whatever it is, they get something from being in nature. But the alone thing is not for everybody. I definitely think that's true. And I am quite introverted in that way. I'm, again, introvert, extrovert type. But I wouldn't have said I had no survival skills. I mean, I could light a fire, but that's because I'd been in Turkey, actually. And we'd had wood burners, so I didn't know how to light a fire. But that was about it. I traveled a lot. I was a big traveler, so I was used to adventure. I like adventure, but that wasn't the type of adventure I'd been involved in. I had before that, the reason I'd bankrupted myself actually was because I'd set up a yoga camp in quite a remote area with somebody else. But
in Turkey?
In Turkey, yeah. I would say that was the stepping stone really to taking me to what I did later on. I'm not sure that I would have been able to, it gave me something. It definitely gave me a hint about where to start when you find yourself in a sort of remote situation. But it wasn't the same because it wasn't as remote, and I was on my own that time, the second time. I was in a community the first time, so it was different. It was different. And I definitely wasn't connected to the land in the same way. That experience happened when I was on my own on that piece of land. And I do think it's to do with connecting with a space, because we're used to seeing the planet as, we're used to objectifying pretty much everything that isn't us.
And us as well.
And us, it's true, actually. And us. We're always in that situation. It's true.
I think I objectify myself on Instagram sometimes.
No, it's true. It's very true. It's very true.
all in the...
It's a question who's doing the objectifying, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I partly say I do it consciously as, part of a whole kind of cultural thing that's happening there, but in a very genuine sense, it's probably not what my soul needs.
No. Well, I think the whole object-subject thing it's an illusion.
Right.
It's not a reality. It's some kind of psychological mind issue that we've got. I think it's the fundamental issue, really. It's not true. It's not real. The planet isn't an object. It's an incredibly powerful sentient being full of millions of other sentient beings, and we're all plugged into it, and we're all connected, and we're all basically one whole system, one whole being. And it's fascinating because it doesn't really fit into logic that there's all these minute beings creating one being, and they're all one at the same time as being individual. But that's how it is, I feel.
Do you feel like because when you say, you were doing the yoga camp and you were on the land, and I'm sure at that stage you felt like you were connected to nature.
No, I wasn't in that thing at all.
You didn't even have a kind of a sense that that's what you were doing?
No, I wasn't in that mindset. It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's like a switch flicked. Mm-hmm. No, I was in the yoga thing. That was the big dream. I'm going to run a yoga camp. That was the dream. It wasn't anything. And I was classically one of those, the people, like many of us are, nature was the backdrop. And this is the yoga camp. We're talking well over 10 years ago now. So that happened. That was in 2008. No, I really wasn't in that mindset. And I wasn't in that mindset at all until I camped on my land alone. I really didn't. I didn't get it. I wasn't to say I didn't appreciate nature and I didn't like animals, and I did appreciate it. I thought it was beautiful, but not in the same way, not in the way that I feel now that it's my family.
Can you share how that happened?
Well, it started because I was camped on that land, and then you're in a situation where you're vulnerable because you don't know what you're doing. So that's a very useful state to be in a way. You kind of get all your comfort, all your crutches are taken away. I was also I'd hit 40, so I was in a kind of mid-life crisis zone. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't want to teach anymore. I hated teaching, and I didn't have enough money, so I was kind of desperate. And somehow, unfortunately, it seems like we have to get to that desperate point to be able to shake us out of our little comfort zone, or uncomfort zone as it is a lot of the time. Unfortunately, at least that was the case with me. And so I was in that tent, and things would happen. I was scared quite a lot of the time. I was scared. I mean, at that time, I didn't think everything, in the beginning, I didn't think everything was my family. I didn't think the boar coming down the hill was my family. I was terrified. The creepy forest at the back. I remember I just used to be terrified coming. Like I'd have this little zone outside my tent, sort of, probably, I don't know, 50 meters max.
Mm-hmm.
Anything beyond that was the wilderness, the terrible, fearsome forest. God knows what lurks in there, what's going to kill me, snakes and scorpions and all the rest of it. I was terrified of standing on scorpions or snakes coming to get me. For a lot of the time, I was terrified. And then things happen and you have to trust. You have to kind of let the planet and the nature and land and other things come in to support you. There was a tree, I called her Grandmother Olive, and I know you talk to trees a lot.
I do.
Really started, I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but I really started to sense this tree talking to me and helping me and supporting me. And I never really knew, and I still don't, because I talk to trees a lot now, but I still never quite sure, is it something to do with the trees are allowing a better part of ourselves to come forward? Is it the tree talking? Is it the planet talking through the tree? Is it me projecting onto the tree, but a better side of myself? I'm always never quite sure what it is, but I only know that it gave me such a sense of support and prophecy a lot of the time. But I mean, you tell me about your tree experiences. I'd like to hear about them.
All right. Well, yeah, I had an experience where, yeah, again, I would say I don't know what it is. And I don't always need to know either. I kind of pretend it's the tree talking to me directly, but I don't know if that's what it is. Like, I don't know if it's like you said, some other part of myself that I can hear. It definitely is an alchemical process. It's not that if anyone stood there next to the tree and learned how to listen to that frequency, they would hear the same thing. And the way that I have these beautiful kind of dialogues with trees, it's very profound and there's a specific tone to it that has this very, very deep wisdom. And it's quite instructional, but on a poetic level. I mean, it does speak more of my soul than it does of, I don't know if all trees are like that in nature. And I have another friend who talks to trees, and she has an experience where the tree will actually tell her like the history of the tree and the history of the area, and actually very kind of land fact history based. And I don't have that experience. It speaks to me more of like, we all have a different kind of language that we navigate through. Maybe it's the language of our soul, of how we make meaning out of our existence. It's in that very language that I hear the trees. But it's not just trees. It can be the moon, or it can be the ocean, or it can be a flower or a butterfly or something. So I have to just really, really kind of focus my energy with whatever that piece of nature, that being is that I'm interacting with. And then it kind of opens up this space of beauty, and then the words, they just flow. I can't write them down. It just used to be a very, very private thing that would just happen between me and the trees. And I had one experience in the Forest of Dean, which is the Lord of the Rings kind of inspired forest in the UK. And it was almost like all the trees were kind of talking at the same time, but then through one tree, but I could feel all the aliveness. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And that sense of connection and aliveness and into being that you can feel when something like that happens is incredible. It really, the moments that I've had like that are moments that feed my soul constantly in the day-to-day, which is often not like that, especially, you know, when I'm in London. I'm in a high-rise tower and it's a different kind of experience. What I found is that over the years I've become braver with sharing these tree whispers, I call them. And
yeah, me too.
yeah, and it's because they're so, you know, and they are, I could just say that they were my poems, you know, but I like to give the trees credit because it feels like it's happening together. And I feel like that, yeah, that brings them more into our world.
I think you put it really, really beautifully. And I think you said there was three things you said at the beginning. I was like, yep. Alchemy. You said the word alchemy, connectedness, and there was something else. I can't remember, but there's this alchemical part. And the way that you were saying how each person has a different connection and different conversation with this, could be with the same tree. And that's exactly how I feel about it and how I perceive it, that it's a conversation, it's a relationship between you. And as you said, I agree with you. Rocks are another one for me. A conversation between you and the planet in whichever form it's coming. And actually it goes back to kind of what we were saying about the object-subject thing, which is a lie. And I suppose that's why we're getting confused, because it is all us. But we don't really know how to process it mentally. So it's much more understandable conceptually to say it's the tree is speaking.
Yeah.
And allows that alchemy thing to happen. So it's not just like me planting something. Because you're right, it doesn't happen if Joe Bloggs stands there, or it doesn't happen to me with certain other things either. I don't get that feeling at all in cities. Well, some cities, but not. And certain trees speak to me louder than others as well. It's almost like they call me. They want to say something. They want to share something with me. And others don't feel like they're that bothered.
Yeah, I guess that's because everything's relational, right? Even in nature.
Yeah.
It's not like all things are equal in terms of alchemy, in terms of relationships, in the same way that you don't resonate with every human.
No, that's right.
And it's not like you don't then like the human, or you don't like the tree that doesn't have that chemistry with you, but it is like that. I will definitely be like walking somewhere. For me, you know, the trees in the city do talk to me, and that helps a lot with city life. But like, I'll just be walking somewhere and I'll just be like, oh my gosh, like I've got to go. Sometimes it's a wall, like you said, you know, like a big rock formation or something.
Caves, beautiful. Yeah.
And you feel that call, like it's got something for you, it wants you to come. So I also feel like by sharing those messages, I'm doing my service, like as a human in relationship.
That's exactly how I feel about it too, and why, like you, I sort of outed myself about it.
Yeah,
but I also think something's happening. Something's happening to human consciousness too. I feel a lot of people are having that sort of awakening at a similar time. As I said, I wasn't, even though I was doing plenty of meditation, plenty of yoga before, I wasn't sensing it in that way until, so it would have been probably 2011, 2012 time. It's something clicked, and I suddenly saw it very differently. And I can't go back to seeing it how it was. And suddenly it becomes very painful when you see people acting exactly how I was before. So I'm not going to be judgmental because I was doing exactly the same thing. It's just a switch in perception. But what I do feel is very heartening. I said to you before, when you and other people in the group were in the Patreon group were saying as well that they were talking to trees, and I suddenly felt and I've heard quite a lot of people talking about it lately. It's the shift that needed to happen. For me, it's much more important. That shift is much more important than just giving up plastic or something which is very which is very in this old paradigm brain still. Oh, we need to do this to solve the problem. Hang on a minute. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Do you mean like this moment, or do you mean tomorrow? Or did you talk to a tree when you got that information? How did you decide that's going to solve everything? For me, the shift that really needs to happen, and I think is happening, is the shift that we're in that perception that we are not subject objects, victims, oppressors, this kind of thing, that we're all one being and very powerful because of it. Very, very powerful. The life force that's running through this planet is power. That's what it is. And we are all, that's running through all of us, every single one of us. And the system, the whole system knows what to do, really knows what to do. And I get this when I'm stuck building, because I'm now building alone here. I'm now in Spain. We'll get on to that later, no doubt, why I left Turkey, but I'm building alone here. And sometimes I haven't a clue what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, I have to bash a hole through the wall to make a stovepipe hole. I haven't got a clue. I've never done this in my life before. And then I go and talk to a tree, or talk even to the stones, actually, to the rocks. And they lead me through it. And it's like you said, the voice has a ring of truth to it, a profound ring of truth to it, which feels very different from the normal bickering in your head. The sort of like, do this, do that. Don't do this, don't do this. It feels very different. It just has the ring of truth.
Yeah.
And I think when you can sense that ring of truth, things get a lot easier and a lot clearer.
Yeah, it's like when you said about how all of nature is family now, and it's that shift, isn't it? Like, I'm just working on this book at the moment about intuition, and one of the things that came up was, that this idea that you can talk to someone. So if I want to hear my intuition, I have different ways of doing it. I might sit and write, I might sit in a kind of meditation, I might go and talk to a tree, or I know that there are certain people in my life that to stay well away from if I want to hear my own intuitive wisdom come out. But I also know that there are people that I can go to, and if I talk something through with them, I'll end up telling myself what the kind of wisdom through that alchemy of that conversation. That's what I feel happens when I talk to the trees, that it's the space that it gives me is to kind of step into that wiser aspect of my being that is completely connected to the aspects of all being and all consciousness. And I think that it was scary to share that publicly, and then it just gets less scary. It gets a little bit like I can't be bothered to like pretend that that's not happening anymore. Like the kind of pretending that we are less than we are as human beings is really exhausting, actually, when I know that I'm still only using a tiny bit of my potential. And when I started to share these messages, I started doing it just for friends' birthdays, and then it kind of evolved into Presence Collective. I'm sharing them every month. And actually, it's everyone's favorite part of Presence Collective. I feel like they always listen to that and they're like, yes, that spoke like really directly somewhere. And, I shared one on the podcast, and now it's kind of that's out in the open as something. And when I don't know how to move forward with something, or I know that I can go and have that connection that is on such a deep, deep level, and create that alchemy, and it takes me out of that victim place. And you and I have had little conversations about this, but I'm really questioning at the moment in particular this, where we're at with the climate crisis. And I did this talk recently which was, what if climate change is our greatest teacher, was the question. And something that just really came up for me was that I don't feel like nature is like crying and suffering and we all need to like kind of be in this like, oh gosh, everything's awful. Like, I think the grief is about what we're losing.
Yeah. And I think that's a part that you go through. when you connect with it and see it's your family and it's a part of it, you suddenly think, wow, how can we be doing this? That is a part of it. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, please. It's more, to open up this different way of seeing nature. And I think the more that you get into kind of loving communion with nature, and I've got a long way to go to be where you are. Like,
no, I don't. I think it's like that, and you sort of switch on, and you're in it or you're not, sort of thing, moment to moment thing. It's not. There's no location, this great promised land thing.
That's one of our traps of thinking.
Connected, sometimes I'm like. But like I have these issues, like I've got a vole eating my veg right now. It's a very cute vole. It comes even talks to me. But how is it annoying?
Right.
It's a really interesting dilemma. How am I gonna cohabit with you, my friend? You're eating my veg.
Right.
Really difficult to stay in the zone.
But then that's also interesting, because one of my friends grew up on a small farming island, and he's very connected to land because he's worked the land his entire life, and is also much more clear on, like, in the circle of life, things do have their place.
Yeah, they do.
And it's not all like, oh, oneness.
No, it's not bunny rabbits. It's not all like pink bunny rabbits. And nature's pretty unsentimental. But then again, that's only if you're looking at it from the individual separation perspective. If you're looking at it from life force perspective, there is no death. You can't kill life. You can only kill individual parts of it.
Yeah.
The life force system, which no one understands. I mean, anybody who says they understand this is lying. It's incredible how life keeps going, how it even appears in the first place. It's not something we can grasp. It's really, really incredible. It's a miracle, and you can't kill it. It's unkillable. It doesn't matter what happens to the planet. In one way, the life force itself will not die, but it will take different forms, which it always has. And that's not to dismiss. Because this is the danger. This is what happens. You say one thing and it gets pulled by us. It's not about, again, survival. For me, that whole conversation about survival is so misguided. It's not about that. It's about quality of life. Quality. It's not quantity, it's not length, it's quality. And what we've totally missed all the time is the sacredness of every single moment, of every single thing. Actually, the other thing's problem, it's our problem. We have completely polluted our own reality. As soon as we don't sense that sacredness, which I mean, I'm guilty of this too. I'm not saying. So I go online, I'm on Facebook, and it's gone. And then an hour later, I'm like, oh man, what have I just done? It lost the sacredness disappeared, and I killed my quality of life for an hour, for no reason at all. Addiction, that's it. So it's that sacredness that we've lost, really.
It's complex, isn't it? Because even though when you are on Facebook and you are also connecting, you're supporting things, it's not a complete, it's not a complete waste. That's why everything's so complex.
No, that's why it's very, very sneaky and tricky, because it's absolutely true. I've had many thoughts. Should I just shut everything down that I do online and just go off? I have it's another dream, go off into the wilderness. But there's another part of me that I agree. Those connections are very valuable. And I've also learned many things because of it. Many, many things because of being online. It's opened many doors, but it's very, very tricky because it's addictive. So we have to find a way to navigate that online space, I think. I wouldn't like to say I'm an expert at all. So
the more we can embrace the complexity, then we realize that nothing is good or bad.
Exactly.
And it's all about our relationship to it. You know, when I see my friend like throw something at a little animal that shouldn't be near the vegetables, and I'm like, oh, it's so mean. And he's like, otherwise we're not going to have the vegetables.
Yeah, well, this trick, because there is a lot of ecological one-upmanship, let's say. And it's a nonsense. There is nothing, you can't do anything. Anything you do has an impact. I mean, even breathing. Anything. If you stop using plastic, so what are you using in its place? And then everyone starts using hemp, and so then they start cutting the rainforest down to grow hemp plantations, and so it goes on. It never ends. We're never going to solve it on that level, I don't think. And I'm so happy that we've already kind of touched on what I do think is the thing that has the greatest impact, and it is that you've been talking about. We need to evolve into another place that is the place of intuition, that is the place of oneness, of being connected to nature, that is the place. And unless we do that, all the other stuff it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You just get, okay, you move it around and then there's another problem, and you move it around, there's another problem. We haven't got to even a political system, it's the same. There is no answer in that framework, because that framework is just, it's obsolete now. It's got to go. It's going one way or another. The solutions aren't there. And it goes back to what I was saying about being desperate, I suppose. Perhaps humanity has to get to that desperation point to where nothing works, where nothing within that old system works, to move into another kind of consciousness, to move into another kind of awareness, to a place which now many people will say is nonsense, nothing can happen that way, but in a place where miracles happen. That is the place where miracles do happen. Things come from apparently nothing. And I'm sure because you live an unusual, extraordinary life, so I'm sure you have experienced that too, but pretty much most of my life isn't based on logic now. Very little of it. Most people would think the way I make my decisions and the way I go about things is madness, that it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah, but I do have the experience of when I fully trust and I just do things and I let them happen from that kind of expansive place. I mean, the science is there that explains like the quantum field. So we do know that this exists, that there is a consciousness that is lighter and expansive and infinite, and that we can all step into it. But it's hard to stay there. Yeah, it is, because this is why I spend a lot of time alone on mountains. Because it's easy when you're alone in a mountain. It's very easy because everything around you is already resonating at that kind of frequency, so it's very easy. And that's why I wonder whether when we're talking to a tree or with a rock, that's why maybe we get those intuitions, because those things are already in the zone. They live in the zone. I mean, it's like another world up here. I feel like I'm on a different planet Earth, and then it's very, very not very far away, maybe 20 minutes drive down the mountain, and suddenly, wow, you're in civilization again. And it feels very, for me, it feels very depressing. Even, I mean, it's a beautiful place, even. It's not even a depressing town where I'm going down to. It's a lovely little town, but it feels... Actually, I had an experience last year, because and that's when I was on the Patreon calls, because I had power. I'd rented a flat for a few months in the wintertime before I moved up here to start building. And I got so depressed in this flat, and it was a lovely little flat in a lovely little town. But I got so down, but very, very down. And and I came up here, and I have no power. I still have no bathroom. I've had nowhere to wash. That's not outside for 8 months, and it's been pretty cold sometimes. It's extremely basic. I have a 2 by 2 meters by 2 meters little hut that I sleep in, another one that's for my kitchen. That's all I have. But
infinitely happier. I'm ecstatically happy a lot of the time up here. And I'm always questioning why, why am I so happy up here? And then I go down there into that zone and I feel horrible. And shopping, oh, the things I'll do to try to avoid going shopping, sort of digging up roots. I think we have to get more sensitive. I think we are getting more sensitive. I think we're way more sensitive creatures than we were 100 years ago, let's say. That sensitivity makes you discern a lot clearer between things. You see the differences, the nuances, which perhaps you wouldn't have noticed before. That's, for me, is different from judgment. Judgment comes with morality. It doesn't exist in nature. There's no morality in nature like in that way. There's no good or bad. Nobody's wagging the finger at you. But I do think things differentiate. All animals can differentiate between different qualities of air, between different magnetic lines that they've got to follow, different light tones. They're incredibly sensitive. So for me, they're not the same thing, really. And so you will discern and you will differentiate what is the most beneficial for you or me. It's only reasonable to follow that, to gravitate towards that. Why would you drink out of a polluted pool when you know that there's a clean, beautiful, sparkling, rejuvenating source 10 meters to your left?
And that comes back to this permission to enjoy your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're bringing me to to Turkey, because that is something. You see, I spent 20 years in Turkey, and there we go. That's one thing. Yeah, I always felt in Turkey the permission to enjoy life was there, because we mentioned it just before and on the call, the Westocentrism of all these debates. It's so Westocentric, and our whole mindset is Westocentric, and that Westocentrism is really based on a lot of Puritanism. It's very puritanical. And that was very obvious to me when I moved after 20 years of being in Turkey back to the West, but to the UK especially. It's incredibly puritanical because that doesn't exist there. There's no work ethic, for example. What a joy, can you imagine? No one has any idea that there's no concept that work is somehow virtuous. Those two things don't go together at all. You can be as lazy as you want. You can sleep in a hammock all day. Nobody cares. What a freedom. What a liberation. What a privilege, actually. It's one thing I really noticed about Turkey. They don't have that. Well, I say they don't. Istanbul is very, very westernized too. So, but even so, yeah. The work ethic doesn't really exist. I remember when I first got to Turkey and I was married at the time, I remember feeling guilty every time I didn't get up early. And my husband's looking at me like I was bonkers. He said, why would you feel guilty about not getting up early? I don't understand. Whereas it was very, that kind of, it's something virtuous in the West to be getting up early and working every hour and being productive and
yeah,
causing more pollution in the process.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I find especially the kind of the UK frame of mind is the one that I know the most. It's the one that I've been unpicking myself. It's just really interesting, the kind of almost like the sense that life is sort of suffering and things are hard, and look, I always feel guilty about when I'm not struggling. I always feel like I have to tell people, because I have created a life that's really wonderful, but it's held together by a bit of a thread. I've given up a lot of security and various things that people would imagine are important to somebody my age, and I often don't know kind of very far in advance how things are going to work on a financial level or whatever. But I feel like I often have to explain to people the difficulties of my life, because of the projection that I get and the judgment almost of like of the freedom that I've created. And it's this funny little game that I
resent it. I know exactly what you mean.
and so, but then what happens is that then by doing that, I undermine what I'm creating, because I end up spending too much energy sharing the other side of it, where actually, like, I don't care. I know that life always is going to be a challenge. Like, there's always going to be things that you have to learn and find new ways of doing things, and kind of see, well, what's the lesson here? What's the opportunity? Like, how can I move forward? How can I do? What am I being asked? What's being asked of me right now? Like, that's always going to be there.
No, I completely know what you mean. I get it all the time as well.
Yeah.
And people assume I must be really wealthy. And I'm like, no. Yeah, and it's you don't. Yeah, it's a battle in myself as well. I have the same issue with it, because obviously I was brought up in Britain. It's still there, and it's so much inverted snobbery in the UK. It's very, very, very heavy kind of competition to be in the worst position possible. It's a very strange mentality, and I find it very difficult, because I don't want to get into that competition, especially because I think you start to create your reality like that. You start to limit your reality in that way. Sometimes I scratch my head when I sort of look. It's fifth biggest economy in the world. It was at one point. I don't know if it still is, the UK. But you wouldn't really think it from the way people live, or their happiness levels, or they don't seem to be enjoying what they've got. And what's the point then? What's the point?
Yeah, it's interesting, because it also, even like in big part of the work that I do, is supporting people in their relationship with themselves, and bringing the practices and the ways of being into the center that bring that sense of the dance, to life. Like, because actually what you have to do on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, it doesn't change very much, but the way that you do it and how much you enjoy it can change a lot with some very simple shifts. But even that difference of like, but I have to do my meditation, or you don't understand, I don't have 10 minutes, and all of this. And what I notice is that when I am in a place where, like, physically, like, so, I've been spending a lot of time in Bali, and the way that I live my life there, I just wake up wanting to do that stuff. It's not a chore or a task.
Oh, and isn't that how life should be?
Yeah.
And I feel like the birds do that, when I wake up in the morning, they're all they're just loving it. They're loving it, and the trees are loving it. They love climbing up and looking for the sun, and I love getting, when I'm up here and I'm doing what I love doing. I'm the same. I'm bouncing out of bed, ready, dying to get started.
Yeah,
isn't that
absolutely? Because, as you said, the life force wants to live.
Yeah.
And I did create this, actually. There was a few years that in London, I lived in this place called, this house, we called it Shiva in the Sky, because it was I lived with two friends, and we very much centered it around like practice and tantric philosophy, not sexy tantra, people, don't get confused. We would get up and we would actually practice together, or sometimes not, like, but one of us would be like, I'd be chanting whilst one of my housemates was, showering and getting dressed. And there was just this sense of this like love of life, and the tantra principle of like embracing all of reality, like all of that you're in, and kind of enjoying that, tapping into that unconditional bliss that exists. And so it's like you can create it anywhere, but I feel like your soul does start to tell you when you create a deeper relationship and you listen. And actually, the deeper you create that relationship, the louder it can be when you're doing something that isn't attuned to that. So like you said, now that your soul knows what it is to live fully in the wild in the way that you do, it really didn't enjoy being in the apartment.
No.
Hello, this is Amisha. We are just taking a little break from the conversation here. On behalf of myself and the team, I want to say thank you for being part of creating a beautiful future. We make this for you, so that we will all have the vision, wisdom, and activism we need at this time to weave a new narrative. Can you help us with this? You can do that by making a monthly donation to the podcast to cover our costs. Just the equivalent of a fair trade banana you might eat or a chai latte you might drink whilst you listen to this will make a huge difference to us. Head to www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community to become a monthly patron. And the other thing is to tell your friends about this podcast so they can tune in too. Send them a message or post on social media and let them know what you love about it. And whilst you're at it, leave us a review. And now, back to the conversation. Thank you for your loving beauty.
Atulya, after living in Turkey for 20 years, what inspired the move to Spain?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's quite a complex question because that was a conversation with the tree. Mm-hmm. Well, it's what sort of started it. I was up in that space and spending a lot of time alone, meditating a lot and communing with the trees and the animals a lot, and I really felt I got into a different kind of energetic space, I suppose. And I use the word energy a little bit. It's the only word in English that you've got, I think. I felt in a bliss state, as you were sort of talking about, in bliss state quite a lot of the time. And then I sort of suddenly sensed, I'm in this energy now. How can I kind of expand or upgrade my life more, I wonder? And I went for a walk. There was a tree, not in my land, just behind it. And I used to call it the wisdom carob. It was a huge old tree. It was so beautiful. It was like an umbrella. All the leaves, the branches created a kind of dome that was so big you could have camped in it. I climbed up. It was a very windy day. It was a very weird atmosphere around. I climbed up this tree and sat in one of the branches, and it said, exactly in sort of that tone that we know, it said, oh, you'll have to let it all go. You'll have to let everything go. And I jumped down because I got quite angry. I said, I'm not letting here go. I'm not letting my land go. I'm not letting my mud home go. Sorry, no, I don't accept it. And I stormed off. The next day, I had to go to the city. I had to drive to the city. Oh, no, I didn't have, I had a motorbike. I had to get the bus to the city then. For 2 days, I stayed with a friend and I came back, went to my neighbour's house because she'd been looking after my dog. And as I did, I saw the person who owned that piece of land with that tree in driving up with a truck, driving up the road. And I said, Dudu, what's going on? And she said, oh, he's just had to cut some of that tree down, the wisdom carob. And I was horrified because it was such a beautiful tree. And I ran to that tree. And it still gives me the creeps this very day. So there were 2 huge trunks to that tree, and he'd cut down the 2 branches I'd been sitting in. The very 2 that I'd sat and had that conversation in were gone. And so leaving the other stem still to grow. And I said to Dudu, I went back, I said, why did he cut that tree? And she said, well, that bit was rotten. You had to get rid of it so the new life could grow. It just the whole thing was so and so I still didn't like the implications of this, and I just, as you do, I just put it to one side and said, no, I can have a new life and a transformation, and I won't let go of this land. Well, it must have been 2 months later, my neighbour Dudu, the same lady, decided to sell 1/3 of her land, the land that was bordering mine, to her children, and they came and bulldozed all the trees down in a day.
Wow.
And Yeah, exactly. But I was just devastated by it. And because until that moment, I'd been very hidden by all these trees, and suddenly they'd and the noise of these trees being bulldozed was horrendous. And then I knew I was starting to be kicked out. I could sense, okay. I talked to the land and I said I wanted an upgrade, and now it's kicking me out. And I knew, and a friend of mine who used to help a lot on the land, he came up and he said, well, this isn't the only beautiful place in the world. There are many others. Why don't you go and have a look? And he'd just come back from Portugal and Spain. And I said, I can't afford those countries. It's Europe. I can't afford Europe. And he said, you'd be surprised. You have a look. And so I started looking, and I realized that maybe I could afford it, because land prices in Spain and Portugal, particularly back then, and still really in certain places, were extremely low. So then it started me thinking. And many issues I was having, I mean, Turkey was in a situation where we were losing democracy very fast. It was very clear. So it was closing down. You could feel it. And there had been a lot of resistance, a lot of protests since about 2011, 2012, until 2016, which is when I was having this conversation. But it was very clear that battle had been lost, that it was going towards a dictatorship. It was very obvious. At the same time, the environmental destruction being wreaked on the place was, for me, unbearable. It's like being in the Amazon and seeing it being cut down, because the virgin forests in Turkey, massive. People don't really equate Turkey with big forests, but it's massive, beautiful forests, pine forests and cedar forests. It's really an incredible biosphere. And it's been largely untouched for goodness knows how long, until now. And so suddenly the political situation is difficult to describe often, because it's different from in the West in some ways, but there's some things that which are similar. And it was a conservative, very capitalist government, both conservative and capitalist at the same time. Islamic government conservatism, I should say, sort of more Islamic conservatism. Yeah, and they were just wrecking the place. So these things were really, really upsetting me, and I was seeing it encroaching sort of around. Well, it was everywhere, to be honest, in Turkey. It's sort of really sad. So that was really upsetting me. So that was another thing that was kind of like pushing me to get out. And then in June, and then I couldn't let this land go though. I was so attached in my mud home and all this effort I put into making this beautiful space, and I couldn't let it go very easily. And then then we had a forest fire. It was June. That was right, a forest fire, and it came, I suppose, within a couple of kilometers of my house, and then turned direction at the last minute. And I'd sort of, when that happened, I'd had to abandon the house. I'd had to abandon it and take a few belongings of my dog and run with a neighbour. We gave up our houses there kind of emotionally there and then. It forced me to give it up. I said, okay, I've lost it. It's gone. It's been taken. I didn't move fast enough. It's kicked me out. As I said, the wind turned at the last minute, saving it. But I got the message. I'm like, you know what? Keep upping the ante here. I need to let go. A friend of mine came and we made a ceremony, and I let the land go, sort of keeping it inside me at the same time, if you like, energetically, but letting it go. Then I wrote the advert and I was about to post it online. I was going to post it. And then I saw there'd been a coup. That we'd had a coup. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm too late to sell my house. We've had a coup. The whole country shut down. We couldn't even leave at certain points. Those of us who were Turkish citizens. And I was like, I can't sell my house. What am I going to do? 2 days later, it was very weird. 2 days later, I thought, well, I'll have to put it on the market. There's nothing I can do, coup or no coup. So I put it online, and I had 40,000 views for this house in a week. It was crazy. It was like the land was just throwing me out. It was almost like it incubated me like in a womb and gave birth and said, go. You're done, out. And that was that. And that's why I left. And so I left with my dog and I bought a van. I didn't know where I was going and traveled along the western coast of, I knew I was very pulled to, it was the Atlantic was calling me, actually. The Atlantic was pulling me. I didn't really know why. And so I was pulled to the western coast of Europe. And so I traveled, I went to Scotland and through the UK, France, Spain, Portugal. And then actually my dog died in Santiago de Compostela, of all places.
Wow.
And that forced me to stop in northern Spain. Yeah, it was very, very, the whole thing was quite haunting in many ways. And she actually got sick, started to get sick very close to where I am now. We got to Santiago before she died. And so that just stopped me in my tracks. And that's really why I ended up here. Yeah, that's how that happened. But yeah, you sort of said before, when you start listening to intuition and you follow those hunches, nobody says it's going to be easy. It doesn't come to you on a plate. And you have to give something up. This is what people don't want to do, myself included. You have to let go of something. And talking more on a global level, to kind of enter a new reality, we've got to give up the old. And people don't want to give it up, obviously, you know, understandably. Nobody wants to give up things. One way or another, we have to. Yeah, that's what change is about. But I think the important thing, which what I feel is being missed, is that people are assuming that the change always has to be for the worst. And I don't buy that. I really don't buy it. As we've already touched on, we're incredibly powerful beings. This planet is miraculous. That doesn't mean we can just sit around and watch Netflix and assume something's going to happen for us. No, we have to do something, but we're all sovereign of our own worlds. And when we create our world, it's part of the whole world. So for me, it's very important that we all create the best, most beautiful reality that we can, that we are as joyful and happy as we can be, that we are creating as much beauty as we can be in whichever way, that whatever it is that we do, whatever our shape is, whatever kind of speciality we have, we create that world, because that world is by necessity impacting the rest.
Thank you so much, Atulya.
Thank you. It was such a beautiful conversation.
And so how do people find you and support you on Patreon and, get closer into this amazing reality that you've created?
Right. Well, for anybody who's interested in off-grid living or building mud homes, actually, that's probably what I'm best known for, building mud homes. You can just go to www.themudhome.com. Stacks of free information there, including a couple of PDFs on how to build a mud home or how to earth plaster. So there's a lot of resources there for free, and those are all supported by a lovely, well, like you, I have a really gorgeous community of supporters on Patreon who keep that site running and allow me to have another part of that, which is Earth Whispering, which is more along the lines of what we've been talking about today. That Earth Whispering blog is also on that website, so you can find that there. So I've got two sides to my work. One side is the mud building and off-grid how-to, the more masculine side, perhaps I might say. And the other side is the more intuitive Earth Whispering, where I share more what's going on in my inner world and more along the line of what we've been talking about today.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, really nice conversation.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mentioned in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listeners' support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question: how will you create beauty in the world?